Good morning. Yeah, it's always an honor and a privilege to be here. I've worked as the proctor, and it's nice to be up in front. As she said, I have my degrees in social science. It's from Eastern Michigan University. Actually, my freshman year was 1967. But Laurel and I, my wife Laurel's down front. She's a security analyst. Thanks. The title changes. Anyway, we finally went back in 2005 to complete the degrees we never needed when all you had to do was work hard and be smart. I got into computers back in the days of punched cards, and when I hacked my first password, it was by going through trash bins, pulling out punched cards where people had made mistakes, and then throwing them away and then figuring out what the passwords were, and it was pretty easy. There were only 8 characters. So over the years, after the dot-com meltdown worked out hard to find, Laurel and I were unemployed for 6 months in Columbus, Ohio. We could be unemployed anywhere in the world. So we moved to Albuquerque. And I went to work for a security firm. I saw an ad in the paper, help wanted, security guards. She says, how does the scofflaw like you get a job like that? I said, well, this is New Mexico. You know, it took Pat Garrett to bring in Billy the Kid. When we went back to school, I worked in campus safety for Washtenaw Community College, then worked for Allied Barton and Securitas. And then the last picture there on the lower left is me with the Texas Military Department. I joined the Texas State Guard in November 2014. You can serve until you're 70. We are not issued weapons. We cannot be sent overseas. We report to the governor. Okay, we're part of the same military department as the Air National Guard and the Army National Guard. About a dozen states have their own state guard forces. So that's me. I was evaluating a dive team. I'm in the Maritime Regiment, and the dive team went out on an exercise to extract a vehicle from a lake. The scenario was that there had been a robbery, an armed robbery that went bad, a high-speed chase, bodies flying out of the car, and the car goes into the lake, and then the car had to be extracted. My job was to make sure that the dive team conformed to the incident command structure defined by FEMA. And if you go out to FEMA online, you'll find a lot of online training that you can do to learn about the incident command structure. It's used by everybody from FEMA down to the fire department. This talk is based on work that I did for an ISO 2000 or 27002. Numbers get bigger and bigger. Conference held here in Austin 2 years ago. ISO 27000 is a suite of products. There's about 20 of them all together. And like all standards from ISO, they are freely available. And they're no different in a sense than any other standard. The nice thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. And you could follow Carnegie Mellon's capability maturity model. You could do value engineering. We've talked about the quality circles back in the 90s. The important thing, what makes this really work, is that you close the loop. You have feedback to improve the process. Okay? The process has to be improvable. You have to have a methodology for finding and fixing mistakes, and more than that, pushing the standards. And ISO 27000 lets you do that by insisting, in fact, that you develop your own guidelines. ISO 27002 is only a format or a structure, and it's up to you then to use that in conformance with the standard to improve your own process. But ISO 27000, the 27K, only applies to software. That was one of the things I noticed about the ISO presentations online, is that they don't talk about physical security. And I know for a fact that most of your risks come from inside, and that physical security is not well addressed. You have all the firewalls you want. If somebody can walk in and put a USB drive on a computer, the firewalls don't matter. So as I said, ISO 27002 to 27K is a starting point. You have to decide for yourself how you need to implement that. So just take one thing that you need to consider is visitors. What are the controls for visitors? Do they have an appointment? Were they expected? Does their contact know that they're there? You call somebody up, say there's somebody in the lobby for you. Who's that? I'm not expecting anybody. Okay? Where do they wait? Do you just turn them loose? We have horror stories. I can't repeat all of them. But we in our house have horror stories of being taken into an interview and being left alone, okay, for minutes on end in a room that's wired with Wi-Fi, right? So is that secure? No. You want your visitors on camera. You want them sitting in a big open area with lots of other people. There's a crime triangle, and I'll mention this again, a crime triangle. All it takes is a willing perpetrator, an available victim, and the lack of a capable guardian. And that capable guardian could just be a neighbor on the front porch watching the street. So if you put people in a social situation where they're sitting in a carrel, maybe a cafeteria type setting, the fact that there are other people watching them will limit their behavior, make them think twice about what they're going to do. If you turn them loose and let them wander around, they will. Our guest speaker said that there's a 1% risk of internal compromise. I think that there's actually a 20% risk of internal compromise. Our figures are that 80% of the people are honest 80% of the time. And if you give somebody a temptation, they will fall into it. Physical intrusions. We've spent a lot of money on the software, on social problems, the hacking, physical security, and down there malware. Everybody's concerned about malware. Malware is only 2% of the problem. 6% of the problem are physical intrusions, people who come in who do not belong there. And the reason why we have a problem like that, 3 times the size of malware, is that you are only spending about 1/4 of 1% of your budget on physical security. In point of fact, universities spend about 11 or 12%, education K-12 about 5%, 4.6, and so on and so forth, all the way down the line. And information technology, 0.27% of your annual budget is spent on physical security. No wonder you have a problem. And you're always thinking in terms of defense, defense, defense. Defense loses to offense. This is the Iraqi information minister announcing that the Americans had been stopped at Baghdad. Meanwhile, in the background, his army guys are shucking off their uniforms and running away. And the reason why is that the Americans drove 36 hours at 50 miles an hour and finally stopped to rest outside of Baghdad. Okay? You have to have an offensive response to an offense. Defense only works so good. You have to have fallback positions. You have to have, as we will see, plan B. You have to know what you're going to do, not if, but when you suffer an intrusion. Okay? And here are some intrusions. Detroit, the office worker was taking work home. Her car was broken into. The USB drives were stolen. You need to have that in place. You cannot let people take work home from the office. We like to reward them for that. I'm taking work home from the office. I'm working hard. I'm going to be promoted. Don't take work home from the office. Don't allow that. You expose your company to risk, and in this case it was a health department, it's a federal HIPAA violation. And then data center robbed four times in 2 years. In that particular case, you should, this is from Slashdot, but there's a lot of stories out there on this. The so-called night security manager ignored the fact that the walls were being cut into. Okay? One, they called him the night security manager. Security guard, I get $10 an hour. Security manager, I get $12 an hour, okay? There's not a big difference there. A lot of security managers are retired police officers because they're living on their pension and they have a nice job that they enjoy. He ignored the noise. He was tased. He was pistol whipped. They got inside, they stole the server, and all the press releases say the server was worth $15,000. They don't say what was on the server. But there are other cases like this of people breaking in just to steal the hardware. They don't care what's on it. I believe that in some of these 4 cases, people did care what was on those servers that were stolen. Inmate captured. He was on a work detail. He ran away. He checked an office building and got inside. He was inside a data center that had a broken door. Okay, he got in. Security guard saw him, almost called the police, dialed 911, then didn't. On the 911 dropped call, they sent the police car out. They searched the building, didn't find him. The police went away at 2:30 a.m. 3:45 a.m., the guard has now had an hour and 15 minutes to actually sit down and review all of the camera logs, and he pinpointed the intruder and then went and found the door that the intruder had gotten into. How to break into a Google data center. Do you think it's possible? It's not a question of when. It's not a question of if, it's when, okay? Sooner or later. And it's not just the data. ISO 27002 talks about human resources, talks about securing your human resources data. They don't talk about securing your human people resources, okay? And this happens in data centers, it happens in factories, it happens on wharves, it happens in bars, it happens in the Supreme Court, okay? We say in criminology that crime knows no neighborhood. There's no one special place where people are worse than they are every place else. And when you have security that someone can get through and put a USB drive on a server and then get out, you also have the security where your own workers are not safe. But our society holds security guards in low esteem, even though 40% of us are former police or retired military. This is the common view of security guards. This came to me one day when I was working a convention site like this one. The vendors were setting up. My job was to be at the door, knock, 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 open the door, check the credential. Okay, you can go in and set up, it's over there. Over and over and over again. I thought about Marvin, the paranoid android, the voice. I like the voice of Alan Rickman for that, you know. Here I am, brain the size of a planet, and what do they have me do? It is common not to take suggestions from security. We know as computer professionals that nerds are funny, right? We get that, and that's okay. But we also have our upside. This is one of the many women lost to history. This is, what's the pirate lady's name there on the far left? Speak up.
Angelina Jolie.
No, that's her on the far right. I forgot her. She played with Cuthbert when they did the Alan Turing movie. And she was in the pirate. Keira Knightley, thank you. See, this is difficult. I have to have good notes because when you walk around like this, your blood is in your feet, not your brain. Keira Knightley, she played Joan Clark. Joan Clark was presented as the girlfriend of Alan Turing. In fact, she had another career after this, and she was given a gold medal by the British Numismatic Society for her unique work deciphering the gold coins of Scotland. But there's nothing like that at all for security guards, not in our culture today. We continue to not have a positive image, a high bar for them, but it wasn't always like that. During World War II, the United States fought a two-front war that involved rockets and atomic bombs. And yet Roy Rogers played an insurance investigator, not a sheriff or a marshal. And back in the days of black and white TV, Wells Fargo had its own detective force. There was no law out on the frontier. They had to protect their own goods. Surfside 6, before Miami Vice, the private detectives of Surfside 6 in Miami pursued criminals. Hawaiian Eye, before 5-0, Hawaii 5-0 gave all the perps the word 5-0 for the police. Hawaiian Eye were private investigators. And Have Gun, Will Travel. He had a username and an account. He had a real name, but he was called Paladin. And if you wanted him, you wired Paladin at the Hotel Barclay in San Francisco. And he came out to stand by you when you had trouble you couldn't handle. These are some of the 36 security guards who died in the 9/11 attacks. We honor the fire department, we honor the police, of course, but we forget these people. And you'll see that a couple of them, Mohammed Jarrah. Okay. This has been going on for the better part of 50 years. Sometime around 1970, 1985, the budgets for private security eclipsed the budgets for public policing. And we lost some of our numbers as a result of the 9/11 attacks, 2001. The figures got a little fuzzy and people didn't always report security or security issues. We weren't giving out information. But sometime in there, those numbers jump. And there was some overlap between what is public and what is private, because when you hire private guards to stand in, for instance, at an Air Force base, is that public or private? But right now, private security has 3 times the budget and 3 times the personnel of public policing. Generally speaking, your protectors are your private security guards. This is the worst security. Okay? And by the way, they're wearing white gloves. They're at a funeral. Okay? There's no doubt that these are fine people. They're dedicated. And right now, they're under siege, directly under fire. Again, another incident last night. But they have a different information system. Their job is to catch somebody who has already committed a crime. It is not their job to protect you. That's why it's a never-ending battle. Lex Luthor, he decides when he's going to strike. He knows what he's going to do. He plans ahead. Superman is always in a reactive mode. He's always trying to catch up, trying to figure out what's going on. But we don't have to do that. In private security, we are not limited by the Constitution. We are not police. We can search your car without a warrant, and we can prevent you from displaying religious symbols at the workplace. You don't have constitutional rights when you're under contract. That allows us to get above and beyond the problem, to get out in front of the bad guys, to be proactive, not to be reactive. Okay? And I've worked with a PhD philosophy professor as a security guard. He was between jobs, trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life. I've worked with a retired nuclear engineer. Some of my supervisors have been ministers, degreed and ordained ministers. We work hard to keep you safe. We're well trained. We'll talk about the certifications. And our job is to protect you. It's our number one job. It's all we're there for, is to see to it that you're safe at work. And this is our overarching organization. ASIS was the American Society for Industrial Security. They rebranded themselves to As Is. It is our certification organization. Now, as information systems and computer security professionals, you are all about certifications. Do not engage anyone to make chief security officer decisions who does not hold ASIS credentials. You know, get these yahoos who say, well, I have 25 years on the Houston Police Department, or I was in the Drug Enforcement Task Force. And that's fine, but you already know that those are admissions of a failure mode for you. If you respect your own certifications, you will insist that your CSO holds as-is credentials. And by the way, I have none. I came into this late in life, so I never had the required 5 years of supervisory experience in private security before you can even take the first level certification test. This is last year's convention. Next year they're going to be up in Dallas, September 25th and 28th. These are their 3 certifications. The lowest level is the Certified Protection Professional. Okay? 5 years of experience in management before you can take the examination. So, okay, what are we going to do for you? Nice as that all is. This comes from basic economics, that businesses predict the future. Now, not always good at predicting the future, but they make those predictions anyway. One of the problems I had in gathering this information was that it was easy to find projections for the budgets of companies 5 years from now. It was difficult to find current information except to take the previous predictions from 5 years ago and say that that's how things are now. But we're always looking forward in business. We want to know what our customers want. We want to know how we can meet their needs. We want to make sure that we are meeting their needs. We want to know what we have to do tomorrow to continue to stay in business today. Facebook announced, oh no more growth. Well, they're going to find other ways to grow. They're going to continue to sell advertising. But you know, they get, I forget what they said, 1.72 billion new users a year, something like that. There's only 6 billion people on the planet. What do you do when everybody's on Facebook? Okay? So they're thinking about the future. They see where that's happening. Government is focused on the past. Okay? Somebody harms you, somebody destroys your property, you take them to court, you call the police. We tried to fix that problem by remediating the past. Private security looks forward prevent problems by predicting where those weak points are going to be. But to be effective, we need independence and autonomy. We need to have C-level representation, and we need to have a recognition of that professional status. What actually happens is different than that. While we're busy doing site assessments, threats, risks, looking at your exposures, modeling preventions, suggesting mitigations, thinking about responses, recoveries, we're doing the same things that I do. I'm also a member of the Austin Community Emergency Response Team, CERT. If you do any emergency response, those words are your vocabulary words. And you might think that you have to be a big company to get this kind of an assessment. You do not. In fact, the police will come out and they'll at least check your doors and windows. This is from a mortgage bank that I guarded, and we identified where our weak points were. They were doors. Being a mortgage bank, everything was pretty much sealed up. Walls and the windows were secure and so forth. You couldn't open them, couldn't open the windows. But we had doors. We had 5 doors, and they had some cameras on them, and the current owners were satisfied with that. But when the bank was sold, the next group of owners put in more cameras, because cameras are pretty cheap. Access control. It's not just the door. It starts way out, 100 meters out from your place. You begin to announce where you are, who you are, assigned to your business. Your business sign can be seen from the road. That's the first barrier. That tells people either how to get to you, but that's assigned to somebody else, that this is not for them. Okay? And you can make that as off-putting as you want. You can make it friendly if you're Target or Walmart, but you define your perimeter far out. Then once you come in, you start using those motion detectors, the badge readers, the cameras, and so forth. So what we do on patrol, we look at infrastructure. I have never seen a software hacker up on the roof with me when I was up on the roof checking the dish. Okay? I never find any hackers in the confined space. I never find them in the dangerous electrical equipment. And I never find them with their Mickey Mouse ears on in the hearing protected area. Right? But we go there. Why? Because things can go wrong. There was one time I was working security. It was a holiday weekend. It was New Year's Eve, actually. I was at the Washtenaw Community College. I was on patrol in one of the buildings, technology building. I heard an alarm. Building's quiet. I go up to what is the 4th floor of a nominally 3-story building. And there in the boiler room, there's an alarm going off. Beep, 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 beep. So I called it in. They told me to go inspect it. I said, well, isn't this facilities problem? Well, no. Facilities won't go in and inspect it until you tell them it's safe. So, okay. Put my hand on the door, it's not hot. Then, stand behind the door to open it as a blast shield. No flames. So I go in, and there was just some kind of over temperature thing, and it was alarming. I had to call facilities. He came in on his New Year's Eve to fix the problem. Now imagine that hadn't happened. Monday morning, 10 a.m., the boiler explodes. That would be bad, really bad, cost of human life. But while you were sleeping, while you were out partying, while you're having a good time on New Year's Eve, 2 other people were making sure that you were going to be safe. It is our #1 job. For us, that comes in a couple ways. Auditable controls for us means that guards report in. We know we have a ready room. We can see our schedules. We know other people's phone numbers. If I need to contact my partner, I can find him on his home phone number, or his cell phone is posted up there. I know who I'll be working with next week. I can ask for time off. But at the same time, those auditable controls, the visitor logs, the visitation schedules, they allow us to prove that we're doing our job. Because we check people off, we sign them in, we put our initials after their name. Shows that we were doing something active, that we were being proactive. And education and training. Working for Securitas and working for Allied Barton, I was assigned to do online training while at work. For one thing, that minimizes the amount of surfing that people do. Among the stupid rules that I've had to face as a security guard is that they don't allow us to carry phones. No phones, no cameras. Why? Why? It's my lifeline, #1, and it's how I record a problem. Some of these pictures I'm going to show you I took with my phone. Right? Now, restricting phones for other people, that could be a good idea. The secure room, right? No cell phones. Put them in a cage, go into the room. There are places where no cell phones are allowed anywhere in the business. Beyond the lobby, there are no cell phones. Everybody has a desk phone. Okay, you're in contact with your family, they have your desk phone number, we have voicemail and things like that, but no cell phones. It's insecure for you. Why? Because it's an easy thing to do to take a picture of a screen, and they're data devices. They're not just phones, they're not just cameras, right? They're internet active, web-enabled computers. So these solutions, they're readily available. The Pentagon calls them COTS, C-O-T-S, commercial, off-the-shelf technology solutions. Okay? And you can find them. You can get this stuff online. They'll send you the glossy magazines that come to your mailbox, and flip through and you find out how cheap this stuff is and how easy it is to install. There's absolutely no reason not to do it. You yourselves, as software people, as hackers, you love this. It's easy for you to make a recommendation. Okay? And it's a crime that your computer security officers, your CIO, is not doing this. Okay? E pluribus unum. Technically, it means out of many, one. I like calling it one out of many, or even one out of a million. I'm not representing Newton, but this is just one out of many different man traps. Why do you have a man trap in one location? Get through the front door, you've got the whole place to yourself. Man traps need to be everywhere. My favorite suggestion is to have a man trap that doesn't do anything. Okay? So your perpetrator gets in, and he goes to the man trap, and now what he wants to do is get the code. But it doesn't need a code. So if he does anything at all, the door's locked. He could have just walked through. It's like a honeypot. But it is a honeypot. Two-factor authentication. If you're not doing this, this is cheap. This is dirt cheap right now. This is today's technology. This is the year 2016. If you're not doing two-factor authentication to get in the building, you have the front door unlocked. And keep a clear zone. And this is where I have a problem with facilities. I have worked in security just a few years ago, the last job I had to report to facilities. It's not uncommon. The facilities manager had a whole bunch of obsessive, compulsive rules that I was always transgressing. But the one rule she didn't have involved the cleaning crew. It was, I believe, quite honestly, a racist assumption on her part that these nice little Mexican people who come to clean our offices can't be dangerous. So the cleaning crew supervisor would come to the front desk and would ask me, and I would count out the cards, and if she had 3 people, I gave her 3 access cards. If she had 5 people, I gave 5 access cards, and nobody signed in. Away they went. Okay? Facilities doesn't have the same concerns as security. If you are assaulted in the parking lot, okay, it's not facilities' problem. Okay? And in this case, because security worked for facilities, I went out there on patrol. I saw this stuff, you know, these pallets piled up. You could start a fire. That would be a distraction. Start a fire there. Everyone, you know, it's kindergarten soccer. Everybody runs over there. And then they go in on the other side. That porta potty is big enough. You can just get over the fence that way. I wrote it up 3 times. My boss said, stop wasting paper. I've already written it up 3 times. Facilities did not have to clean that up. Security should report to the security officer, the CIO or the CISO. You need to have C-level representation different from facilities. You need to work closely between your software security and your physical security. This was another problem I shot with my cell phone I wasn't supposed to have. The razor wire was really impressive. This, by the way, is at a server farm. I worked 2 of the server farms here in Austin. Okay? They both had the same kind of problems. They both had the same kinds of solutions. Nice companies to work for. I'm pretty sure that when they took customers around, potential customers, to win them over, they took them inside where all the bells and whistles were. Nobody walked around the perimeter looking at it with the hard eye of a security guard. So you've got the razor wire, but you've got a little gap there. And it's pretty easy to get one of those utility trucks that has a ladder on it and get over that. Well, as I said, it's online. If you go to the conference pages, This was dedicated to Jason Street. Anybody here know Jason Street? Hey, 3. Jayson. You can Google him. Jason Street spoke at B-Sides 2013. It was called How Do I Pwn Thee? Let Me Count the Ways. And he has a red team that does physical penetrations. He shows up. He's got faxes in those days, still 2013. Faxes, he's got emails, he has credentials, he has a letter, it's on letterhead, it's signed by the boss. He did some homework, he set this up. This is a penetration test. And he had a get out of jail free card. He had the authority behind him that if he actually got arrested, they would, intercede on his behalf. But in point of fact, he had several times, he actually had to go up to the security guard after his penetration and identify himself as an intruder. And the reason he did that is if he just went in and did some data thing on somebody's server and proved that he was there and then left, there would have been no learning experience. Nobody would have benefited. It would have never closed the loop. This gets back to ISO 27000, okay? It's the same thing as Carnegie Mellon's capability maturity model. You have to close the quality loop. You have to show that you can improve, okay? So Jason Street is standing there and he's talking to my wife, Laurel. That red team, they're just so friendly until they pwn you. She didn't see that coming, okay? They will carry you away. An intruder will get past whatever barriers you have if they have enough will. And we know that. This is a mantra. This is one thing that our guest speaker said. You can hear it at every conference. We have to be 100% perfect. They only need to find one flaw. Right? So don't think that you can set up enough barriers, that you can have enough protective devices, that you could have a honeypot, say a USB drive sitting out on a computer at a workstation that's empty, and it just sits there. But if somebody takes it, then the light beam is broken and the alarms go off. So you have a little honeypot out there. That's nice. But if your perpetrator is a little smarter than that, and his goal is to get that server, he's not going to be distracted by that other attractive thing. You have to figure out what you're going to do when they're caught. You can't hold somebody. Usually, it's false arrest and false imprisonment. There are ways that you can do that. You need to get with your legal team on that. If nothing else, if you have an automatic trap, if you have a man trap that comes down when some security violation takes place and you've done nothing, the perpetrators only locked themselves into an area or into a room. So that is perhaps legally allowable. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just telling you what I would do if I were going to design something, knowing what I do here in Texas. Ultimately, it comes back to you and your people. At the OWASP study group, who's in that? One. You and I both missed a lot of those sessions. Do you remember the name of the book that they reviewed? The guy told a lot of narratives about how he was the hero. It was a security book about people and security, improving the culture. One of the narratives was about the difference between why we call anger at the workplace going postal, why we don't call it going UPS, or going FedEx. UPS and FedEx promote creativity and engagement. And they're not necessarily fun places to work. It's hard physical labor, and it's somewhat regimented. You have things you have to do. You have to load a truck. But the post office is horrible, or was, for regimentation. When workers shoot up the workplace, take lives, it is far more often to be an accountant or an account manager than it is to be an advertising creative or the advertising manager. The people in the advertising department, even at a restricted company, have an unrestricted environment where they're engaged. So if you have the kind of workplace where people are engaged, where you care about them, where you show that you care about them, you will have far fewer problems. We have a mantra in security: if you see something, say something. We have signs all over Camp Mabry. If you see something, say something. People won't say something if they don't feel engaged. I worked at DPS, the Texas Department of Public Safety. The rule was you have to have your badge. You must display your badge at all times. And I saw people who did not display their badges, and I confess I did not confront them either. It was not the kind of welcoming, warm environment, okay, where they ask people to step up and speak out. Although, they would want me to do that and probably reward me for it, there was just a general feeling that, well, nobody else said anything. And that again gets into the environment. Just because somebody else didn't say something doesn't mean it's not your responsibility to say something. So if you feel that it is your responsibility, that is because you feel engaged with your employer. So if you create that kind of a social environment for your company, you'll have your people being your own eyes and ears. And when they see something, they will say something. In the old days, and in the Scarborough building downtown at 6th and Congress, if they haven't totally remodeled it, they had these old stations for the watchman. The watchman wore a big watch around his neck, and it had a slot for a big key, like an old-fashioned brass key, about this long, about that long. So he'd have to stop at the station and turn his clock back on, and then walk to the next station while the clock unwound. Then get to the next station. And there might be a printing device inside or something like that. But there's a lot of these controls. And they're okay. They're the auditable controls that show the guards are doing their job at the minimum and allow them to report when they're doing above and beyond. As well as I like to think of security guards, I recognize the fact that only 80% of us are up to standards and there's 20% who are a problem. And that's true in every area. So yeah, I've met people like that. I've worked with that guy. So yeah. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.